Welcome to part 2 of basic map reading and navigation or orientation. At this point you should be able to plan your route, set your course, and set a compass heading. You should also know how to have waypoints, probably by minutes, set on your course, and be able to identify on the map those landmarks on either side of your course which will confirm your position. If you're unable to do these things, you should go back to my first video and review the basics. From part 1 we have already established a route with waypoints and with landmarks, and we're going to fly that route again, this time under more challenging conditions. And now we're descending through cloud. Hopefully, if we keep this heading, as we break out, we should be right in front of waypoint 2. And once again, once you know the basics, it's just a matter of practice. Now we've confirmed our position at waypoint 2, we'll climb back up into the cloud and come out at waypoint 4. There are pros and cons to being able to fly in clouds. There are two big pros to this. One is that you can hide in cloud from other aircraft. And the second is that you can drop out of the clouds, drop your ordnance on your target, scoot back up into the clouds, and head home. And the cons to flying in clouds are quite simple. It's very easy for a novice pilot without instrument training to get disoriented and to come spinning out of the cloud and crash into the ground. And breaking out through cloud, we see waypoint 4 dead ahead. That's the two towns with the lake in between. We're on track. Flying in winter operations presents a whole lot more problems. Although on a nice sunny day like this, you can see for miles, it's very difficult to pick out the landmarks that you need to navigate by. Did you recognize that we just passed over the 2-minute marker, and now we're going to be heading to the 4-minute marker. Up dead ahead you can see the two towns, and we're just making slight corrections here to maintain our heading as we go past them. So here we're flying down the same old route that we've been flying half a dozen times, and it looks different each time. Between waypoint 4 and 5 there really are no identifiable landmarks, especially if you're at low altitude. So once again, just keep your heading needle pegged on your heading of north. Count the time. When the time is up, you will have arrived at your destination. And over on our left, that's the L-shaped town. So we're on track. And the time is up, and there's the airfield dead ahead. So it looks like we get to live to read a map another day. And here's another low-level view of the 4-minute mark, and you can see the town, and then you can just see the lake on the other side of it. Low altitude and rain make it difficult for us to see the landmarks, so it's very different from flying at 2,000 meters. Oh, and by the way, it's probably not advisable to be flying in cloud like that at low level unless you know how to fly on instruments. I have a pretty good instrument flying tutorial that you might want to take a look at. In this low altitude, low speed circuit to landing, notice that my control movements are almost imperceptible. I don't want to stall it by making jerky movements. The ball should be centered all the way through. If there's one thing you've heard me say over and over again is keep your compass heading. Why is that so important? Well, there's a rule called the 1 in 60 rule. Basically it means that if you're doing a 60 nautical mile trip and you're 1 degree off your heading, when you get to your 60th nautical mile you will be 1 mile off your target. Now that doesn't sound like much, but if you were 10 degrees off your heading, that would mean you could be 10 miles off course at the other end. And in this example, you could be 20 miles off course on a distance of 120. And by putting this into game terms, we could say that if we were doing a 60 grid square distance, if we were off heading by 1 degree, we would be 1 grid square off target. It's virtually impossible to fly these aircraft with such accuracy. With no yaw or roll control, these things fly all over the place. So quite likely if you can keep the heading within 10 to 15 degrees, you're doing pretty well. But on a 10 degree error, you could be 6 grid squares off your 60 grid square distance. Just remember that. We are temporarily unsure of our position, but we do see a town over to our left, so we're going to go over and take a look at it and see if we can identify which town it is and then go from there. Once you've identified the town, you should fly right back to your track and then get back on your heading again. Can you identify this town? It's the town to the left of waypoint 4. So what happens if we fly over the waypoint and set course for the next waypoint, and when the time comes up we don't see any of the landmarks that we're expecting to see? That tells you that you are lost, and there's no point in heading in the wrong direction if you're lost. So what do? Don't spend 10 minutes trying to figure out where you are and keep heading off in the wrong direction. Turn around and head back to your last known position. In our case here, if we're heading north, we're going to turn around to a heading of south and fly back the same length of time it's taken us to get to that point. So then we are expecting to see the other waypoint from a different direction, and once we find it, then we can orient ourselves and try again. I'm expecting to be able to see the lake and the town coming up in about 10 seconds. So there's waypoint 2 with the lake and the town, and we'll just do a right-hand turn here and then get back onto track. Making this turn to the right, I'm actually going to go a little too far to the left of track, so I'm not going to stop at north. I'm going to come a little bit further, another 20 degrees or so, until I get back onto my track, and then I'll adjust it back to north. And then I'll take my time and we'll start it again. So in this example, we're not lost, but we do not want to continue along the same planned route for whatever reason. Maybe there's flak or bad weather or fighters or something. We make the decision to make this diversion at the 3-minute mark. So we'll follow the road to the L-shaped town, then we'll turn right when we get to the lake, and we'll head then to the east, following the road or the railway right up to the end of the runway at our destination. At the 3-minute mark, you can see the road going past the airfield. And that road goes straight through the 2 towns off to the left at the 4-minute mark, and then to the northwest towards another lake and the L-shaped town. I'm choosing to fly this at low level just to show you what it's like to try and follow a road at high speed. You never want to fly above the road. You always want to fly one side or the other so you can see it easily. And if it's curving to the left, you'd want to be on the right. If it was curving to the right, you'd want to be on the left so you don't lose it, especially in bad weather. And there's the lake to the right, so we know that we're going to be turning to the right to the east pretty soon. Once we get to the L-shaped town, I decided to follow the road instead of the railway because that took me almost straight in on final approach for the runway. If the weather was really crappy, I would fly right onto the runway and I could do my letdown at that point. Can you follow the road? You should be able to recognize the island in the river there, which we know is not far from the end of the runway. And there it is, another successful diversion. In this exercise we decide that we're going to abort our planned route and take a different route. Once again we'll be at the 3-minute mark when we make that decision. The challenge this time is that we do not have a landmark like a road to follow. But we can choose to head towards a landmark that's out of sight and yet is very distinctive. What is the most obvious, distinctive, easily recognized landmark to the northeast? The mighty Volga River. So as long as we have a heading of basically northeast, we're bound to hit that river somewhere, and then we can turn northwest and head up towards our destination. The only problem is we're not too sure where we're actually going to intersect the Volga River, whether it's going to be to the north of that town or to the south of that town. Irregardless, as soon as we hit that river, we're going to turn straight northwest, and we're just going to follow it up in one of two ways. We can take the left hand or the western route, or we can take the right hand or the eastern route. And just by chance we're flying right over an airfield, so that can easily be identified on the map. And of course by this stage you would have figured out that you had to take the time at waypoint 3 and estimate how long it'll take you to get to the river. Well, there's the town dead ahead, so we know where we are. On the other side of the town, turn left. Time's up. One question we're always asking ourselves at low level is, what obstacles are there ahead? And you can identify 3 obstacles, and perhaps we need to choose one route or the other based on the obstacle. I'm going to choose to take the left-hand western route with the one bridge. My compass heading right now is due west. Is that correct? Am I going in the right direction? And when you take a look at the map, you'll see that the western bridge is pretty close to the airfield. As soon as we cross that, we're almost ready to land. Looking good so far. I mean, what could possibly go wrong at this stage? Notice my speed at this level. 500 kilometers an hour. I can only achieve that by having very little fuel on board. Banking up to the north here, we can just see the bridge coming into view. You might be interested in taking a look at my fuel calculation versus performance video. Uh-oh, that's the sound of an engine running out of fuel. But fortunately, there's an airport right there. Why don't we land? The inevitable nervous silence as time ticks by. Nothing to it, eh? As time and distance are related, how do you know how long it's going to take to get from A to B? There's a simple formula: speed equals distance over time. Now this generates some very useful numbers. For example, if you're doing 360 kilometers an hour, you're doing 6 kilometers a minute. That's pretty easy to copy that onto the map and get your timing. I won't get into that here, but I've already covered that in the previous tutorial, fuel calculation versus performance. If we plan our fuel load correctly, we won't end up running out of fuel just before we get to the airport. Now, only a ninny would do that. As always, if you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like or subscribe. And if you'd like me to cover anything else, please leave a comment. Thanks for watching.